Congressional lawmakers are finally getting their hands on the memos kept by James Comey. President Trump tweeting, James Comey's memos are classified, therefore he broke the law.
James Comey is a disgraced, disgruntled, and now discredited individual. He leaked and then lied about leaking.
Why in the world Jeff Sessions won't name a second special counsel when you have that happening?
World leaders now joining President Trump in applauding Kim Jong-un's decision is to close his country's nuclear test site.
President Trump having strong language and rhetoric in the beginning got us to this point.
The Democratic National Committee taking legal action, alleging a conspiracy by the Trump campaign.
They ought to be suing themselves. They're the ones that colluded with the Russians.
You know, you might not think they're very bright and all of that. You need to have respect for the rest of your citizens. Your country isn't going to pull itself apart.
An emotional day as hundreds of people gathered at a church in Houston to pay their respects.
Barbara Pierce Bush was real, and that's why people admired her and loved her so.
This is one of my favorite songs. It never gets old. That's when you know it's a good song. When you listen to it over and over again and it never gets old.
Pete is back.
Well, it's good to be back,
Pete
guys.
is back.
I was on vacation in an undisclosed country.
I'd like to know the name of it. Maybe we'll find out later.
Maybe. Or Mexico. Great vacations in Mexico. I'm just going to let it out there.
Oh, really?
Yep, I was following the caravan.
How was it?
Scouting out the wall?
Scouting out the wall, following the caravan, actually just sitting on the beach.
A little swamp vacation for you?
No, anti-swamp.
Anti-swamp.
Swamp vacation would be the White House Correspondents' Dinner. I don't know anybody going to that.
I took one of our producers to the Yankees game yesterday.
Yes.
And I got a little excited because there was a guy behind me with the Blue Jays. And he works for the team or something. And he was ragging on the Yankees. I got really annoyed. And Aaron Judge came up and hit a moonshot. Turned around, started screaming at this guy. And I ripped the vocal cord or something.
Well, you brought your medicine cabinet
I got
to our table.
Ricola. I'm ready. But this
a little bit of honey.
This is a great show for Pete because I can talk less.
Yes, he's going to talk less. Yeah.
And for our audience.
A little shot.
It's also a very important day. It's National Earth Day. Did you know that? Is it National Earth Day? No, Earth Day? It's not
Earth Day.
I don't care about Earth Day. But
First time you've ever heard of that?
Well, happy Sunday morning to all of you.
Earth Day.
We are happy to be with you this morning, and there is always news to get to on the weekend. James Comey's memos are still the topic of conversation.
Sure
President Trump was out tweeting about this yesterday, saying, look, I've been treated unfairly in this whole process. Here is what the president tweeted. He said, James Comey's memos, they are classified. I did not declassify them. They belong to our government. Therefore, he broke the law. Additionally, he totally made up many of the things he said I said, and he is already a proven liar and leaker. Where are memos on Clinton, Lynch, and others? To his point, he's saying, Why am I getting treated differently than the others? If you were upset with Loretta Lynch, if you were upset with Hillary Clinton at one point, why didn't you write your personal diaries on them?
A matter or an investigation.
Yep.
There was no memo on that.
No memo for any of the others. White House Deputy Press Secretary Hogan Gidley was on this channel last night, pointed out some important aspects of these Comey memos we want to bring to you. Listen to him.
James Comey is a disgraced, disgruntled, and now discredited individual who got fired from the FBI. He leaked and then lied about leaking. And the best part was he didn't just do it once. He set up a systematic way in which he could get to one of his friends to take classified information. He classified the documents.
Yes, he did.
And then set up this elaborate scheme to somehow leak that classified information to the New York Times so the American people could see it. I don't think this is the end of what we know about James Comey. I think this is the beginning. And more stuff is going to come out.
Ooh, an all-out war now between
that last part caught my ear. Hogan Gidley at the White House saying more is coming out. I've spoken to some of the president's friends who say in recent days during this book tour, the president is privately saying a lot more is coming out. That was not an accidental line from Hogan Gidley. I haven't talked to Hogan about it. But in private, the president is saying, James Comey, get ready, there's more coming. So does that mean they've got more examples of leaking that they think might lead to a prosecution? Is there just more bad stuff about Comey? More is coming, I'm hearing from the White House.
Well, the DOJ Inspector General referred Andy McCabe for criminal prosecution. They're now, the DOJ Inspector General we know now is investigating Comey. Right. There was a great op-ed by Jonathan Turley in The Hill pointing out that, we know four things. We know Comey was a leaker. We know the memos were FBI material. We know there was no urgent need to leak. And the memos were classified. Here's part of what all FBI agents sign at the FBI. I think it's important to point out. all FBI agents sign a statement affirming that, quote, all information acquired by me in connection with my official duties with the FBI and all official material to which I have access remain the property of the United States of America, and that an agent will, quote, not reveal by any means any information or material from or related to FBI files, and this is key, or any other information acquired by virtue of my employment to any unauthorized recipient without prior official written authorization by the FBI. Tell me how, when you look at what Comey did, he didn't break the rules of what he swore an oath to. So for the DOJ Inspector General to now be looking into him, it ain't just McCabe, it's probably going to be Comey next.
Yeah.
Wow. I think the president is tired of James Comey having it his way and controlling that narrative. So that it may just be the beginning between these two.
Right.
As you said, more may still come, but a busy week ahead in Washington. You have President of France, Macron, with this big state dinner early this next week. Well, big stunner here. The president, he's decided not to invite Democrats or the media to the week's dinner with that president. There's an interview on Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace and Macron, and I saw snippets of that interview, and it's very clear that these two have a very strong relationship, President Macron and President Trump.
It's his link to Europe, really.
Yeah, and they're obviously going to be talking about a number of important issues, North Korea, Iran being the Iran deal, probably one of the most important ones, but not a surprise, Pete, that the president's saying, Democrats, media, you're not invited.
No, I have my thoughts on that before I do. No, Ed, you've covered this.
Yeah.
What is the normal protocol of who gets invited and why? Because this is the first state dinner for this president, but there remain
members of Congress in both parties, business leaders, and usually some members of the media. I'm not surprised the president's not inviting the media, and who cares? People are going to whine about it. Who cares?
Yeah.
But it's probably a mistake to not reach out to a couple of Democrats. There are some Republican senators going, have a couple Democrats there. Show some bipartisanship.
I think that's
because they've shown so much bipartisanship to him.
He can be the better man.
I'm still looking for that unicorn, Ed. I'm still looking for that unicorn Democrat that supports this president. I'm keep being told that there's one out there. Why? What olive branch?
But he's the president.
When they're suing you to discredit the election that you won and you're duly elected, and then their handlers in the media do the same thing.
But that's the DNC. You've got some Democrats on the Foreign Relations Committee, Ben Cardin or somebody who does sometimes reach across the aisle.
I think you make a good point. You're ultimately the president of the United States. It's your job. If the Democrats aren't going to do it, Republicans aren't going to do it. It's up to the president to bring people together.
I think we should have a Republican party, a party with Republicans and the Republic of France.
You know what I want Pete to do? I want him to live with the Democratic family for like 2 months and film it and come back and see.
That would be a reality show.
If your views
that would be good. My views would not change. Theirs would.
What about Colin Kaepernick?
Yeah,
Has your
Colin
view on him
Kaepernick. It has not. Although Colin Kaepernick was given an award. He was in Amsterdam, I believe. Wins the Amnesty International Award. We'll let him. You know about him from this program and others. The kneeling protests he brought to the NFL. This is Colin Kaepernick on those anthem protests after being given this award. Listen.
How can you stand for the national anthem of a nation that preaches and propagates freedom and justice for all, that is so unjust to so many of the people living there? How can you not be in a rage when you know that you are always at risk of death in the streets or enslavement in the prison system? How can you willingly be blind to the truth of systemic racialized injustice? My love for my people serves as the fuel that motivates me and fortifies me on my mission. It is the people's unbroken love for themselves that motivates me even when faced with dehumanizing norms of a system that can lead to the loss of one's life over simply being black.
So we say that Colin Kaepernick is back because he hasn't been speaking out for the past while, and I think he's been out of a job.
Hasn't been signed.
We don't know where he'll end up. Rumors that he may go with the Seahawks, but I want to read part of the speech where he talks about lawful lynchings. Here's what he says. He says, racialized oppression and dehumanization is woven into the very fabric of our nation the effects of which can be seen in the lawful lynching of black and brown people by the police and the mass incarceration of black and brown lives in the prison industrial complex. Some very strong words.
The idea of lawful lynching by our law enforcement, to attack law enforcement continually, is where he really messes up. He can speak out. He has strong views. And this is America. He should be able to do that. But when he attacks law enforcement again and again, it's ridiculous.
That's right. I mean, tell it to the cops who serve us every single day. Mistakes happen.
Or the ones that have lost their lives recently for no reason at all.
Of course, but to go on, again, I think the big problem here is you go to foreign soil, receive an award from a bunch of elitists, globalists who don't love America anyway, and then you go crap on America to them and give them all the more reason to think this is a terrible place to live. If it's so terrible, why are you here? I mean, I'm glad you're here. Play football for the Seahawks if you want. You'll sit on the bench because you can't complete a 15-yard out. But ultimately, I mean, it's very self-aggrandizing at this point. If you want to protest, you can protest all you want, but we'll see if this anthem protest continues into this next season.
Yeah, to your point, if he wants a job, come back here and focus on that.
Yeah.
And get better, because he hasn't been great in the last couple of years. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, email us, friends@foxnews.com. What do you think about the Amnesty International Awards? Who should win it next year? No, that's not our question.
Pete is back and is just getting fired up.
Welcome back, Pete. It's good to have you.
It's great to be here, guys.
All right, I do want to bring you some other headlines that we are following this morning. And, of course, yesterday, the emotional tribute to the life and the legacy of former First Lady Barbara Bush. The woman affectionately known as America's grandma is laid to rest at a Houston church where loved ones remembered her humor and passion for education.
Strength and dignity are her clothing, and she laughs at the time to come.
She was our teacher and role model on how to live a life of purpose and meaning.
And a powerful moment as daughter Dorothy is seen consoling an emotional former President George H.W. Bush as he says goodbye to his wife of 73 years. Also in attendance, First Lady Melania Trump sitting next to the Clintons and the Obamas. What a day to remember it was yesterday.
Yeah.
All right, well, to sports now. Major League pitcher Danny Farquhar remains in critical condition, suffering a brain hemorrhage moments after coming off the mound. Dramatic video of the Chicago White Sox carrying their reliever out of the dugout moments after his shocking collapse Friday night. His teammates keeping him in their prayers, hanging his jersey seen there in the dugout as they continue their series against the Houston Astros.
Wow.
Also with him.
Yeah.
And the Supreme Court preparing to tackle two blockbuster cases this week. On Wednesday, justices will look to decide the fate of President Trump's third travel ban after Hawaii called it unconstitutional. The ban affects 5 Muslim-majority nations, North Korea and Venezuela. On Tuesday, the court will hear arguments in the fight to redraw Texas's congressional district map. The GOP-controlled legislature accused of using it to keep Republicans in office. Also this morning, Mitt Romney is heading for a primary runoff in Utah. The Republican candidate for president in 2012 failing to secure his party's nomination for this time around in the race for Orrin Hatch's soon-to-be open Senate seat. He's going to face Utah State Rep Mike Kennedy in a June 26 primary after Kennedy emerged with a 50-49 advantage at the state's GOP convention. The very same event where Romney reportedly said he's not ready to endorse, remember that? Not ready to endorse President Trump for re-election. Well, despite receiving President Trump's full support for this race, we're going to talk more in depth about this one.
We are.
Next hour, so look forward to that.
Turns out the people get a vote. Can't just run back to the state and be like, I'm about Utah now.
That's what conventions are for.
That's what conventions are
Welcome
for.
back, Pete.
We might talk a little bit more about it. All right, well, we'll move on. The liberal professor under fire for celebrating Barbara Bush's death, now sparking more outrage.
No woman asked 2 questions. Look at this. I'm so proud when people walk out of my talks. I'm just like...
And somehow, she still has a job. A student at Fresno State is here to weigh in just ahead.
Plus, North Korea halting its nuclear program in a stunning reversal. But how much should we really trust Kim Jong-un? We're going to ask the author of unauthorized biography of Kim Jong-il. Don't want to miss that. That's right next.
And does Hillary Clinton have a crush on Ed?
What?
Yeah. The new bombshell revealed in the new Hillary Clinton book.
Ed,
Coming up.
I have no comment.
XO,
I can't. I have no comment.
A stunning reversal in North Korea. Kim Jong-un halting the country's missile testing and closing one of its nuclear sites ahead of his upcoming summit with President Trump.
But our next guest says something is not adding up. Here to explain, Michael Malice, author, Dear Reader, the unauthorized biography of Kim Jong-il. Good morning. What do you make of these latest developments?
Something's not adding up, as it often does with North Korea. Let's suppose we were having a summit with Trudeau from Canada, our allies for decades, strong allies. And ahead of the meeting, Prime Minister Trudeau said, we're going to give you this, we're going to give you that, and ask for nothing in return. It wouldn't make sense. Maybe he would give it up at the end of the meeting, but certainly ahead of time, he's not going to put all his cards on the table. So maybe Kim Jong-un is reading Art of the Deal in reverse or something, because clearly he's not asking for.
But isn't it because President Trump said, fire and fury, you're going to go down if you take us on?
After he said fire and fury, remember, they were saying they were going to hit Guam with missiles, and in November, they sentenced President Trump to death in absentia. So it takes a lot to go from, we're going to kill you in November, and in April, we're just going to give you everything we want and ask for nothing in return, especially in light of what happened in Syria.
Right.
Syria just was struck, less than a couple of weeks ago, and now they're saying they're going to give up their nukes, and they're also saying they're perfectly comfortable having American troops in South Korea as part of the deal, which has been a sticking point for them for decades, since the end of the Korean War. So again, and this, as I was saying earlier, with regards to Trudeau, this is our close ally. Here we have our worst enemy. So to trust them at their face value makes no sense.
So what was the turning point? Because if you listen to Kim Jong-un and speaking to his own state party the other night, he says, we have finished our nuclear weapons program. So he can now deliver for his dad and his granddad, a book that you've written a lot about.
Sure.
That was their dream. That is all they wanted for their country. So he's saying it's a win-win for us because we have our nuclear program and now we can open up to the West and fix our economy.
But they can't really open up to the West because these people have been lied to for 70 years. They're taught that we started the Korean War, for example, as opposed to their founder, the great leader Kim Il-sung. So can you imagine what would happen to a nation that learned, like if we learned that George Washington was a genocidal dictator? It's not going to make us like the federal government a lot more. So if they even wanted to open up, his hold on power, which is already tenuous, would implode. So again,
so what should we be most concerned about? You're saying this came out of nowhere when they were acting quite differently just months ago. So why should we be nervous? Why should the president be nervous?
In the same way that a couple of days before the election, Hillary was tweeting out, happy birthday to this future president. Everyone's cheering and applauding as if we've won and North Korea is going to liberalize and give up their nukes and close down the concentration camps. Let's celebrate when these things actually happen, as opposed to simply a pause on the nuclear program and a lot of hot air coming out of his mouth.
Kim Jong-un is going to go to the table and say, never mind. I tried. I did all these things a month ago, and then I go to the table, and President Trump is going in a different direction. I'm done. I tried. Is that what he's
That's certainly an obvious thing for him to do. It would be very easy for him to say that we tried the peace way. Now we have no choice but to amp up the nuclear program. We don't know what's going to happen because we also don't know how President Trump is going to approach him. And President Trump is playing his cards close to his chest, which is very intelligent when dealing with someone like this.
Well, proceed with caution.
Yeah.
Very interesting points. Great to have you on, Michael.
Thanks,
you
Abby.
know this all too well. Good to see you. All right. Well, the DNC suing Team Trump, the Russians, WikiLeaks, and more over election interference. But does the move just show the party's desperation? We're going to debate that. And this liberal professor celebrated Barbara Bush's death and attacked Trump supporters as stupid farmers. Well, now we are hearing even more disturbing comments. And this woman still has a job, believe it or not. A student from her college is joining us right here next.
No woman asked 2 questions. Look at that. I'm so proud when people walk out of my talks. I'm just like,
welcome back to Fox and Friends. Some quick headlines for you. Right now, samples from the site of the horrific Syrian gas attack are in the hands of chemical weapons investigators who gained access to the site for the very first time. Inspectors have been kept from the scene amid security concerns, sparking fears of evidence tampering by the Assad regime and their allies in Russia. Those samples from Duma will help determine whether banned substances were used in that April 7th strike. And Secretary of State nominee Mike Pompeo will face the Senate tomorrow for another round of confirmation hearings. Lawmakers holding their final vote for President Trump's top pick for the office, as some Dems accuse him of lacking diplomacy.
All right, well, the liberal professor under fire for celebrating the late Barbara Bush's death in a tweet, calling her an amazing racist, is now sparking even more outrage.
Fresno State professor Rhonda Gerard seen in newly resurfaced clips saying even more offensive comments. Take a look at this.
A person hones their writer's voice is by telling people to shut the up when they annoy them. Dude, no woman asked 2 questions. Look at that. I'm so proud when people walk out of my talks. I'm just like,
Yeah, because when you swear, it makes your argument more powerful. Here to weigh in, correspondent for CampusReform.org and student at California State University, Fresno, Bernadette Tazy. Bernadette, thanks for joining us this morning. We're going to put up one more quote from this esteemed professor. She also said this recently. She said, Fresno is one of those places where, like, a lot of the agriculture, a lot of food that America eats is grown there or around there, even though a lot of the farmers are now Trump supporters and just bleeping stupid. So between a tweet that mocks the death of a first lady, what she said in the clip you heard, and all Trump supporters are stupid, I mean, where does this mindset come from for this professor?
You know, I think this is very disrespectful and it's very shocking, but honestly, I'm really not surprised that this is coming from a university professor. And I think other students, even on other campuses, would say the same, unfortunately. And while Professor Giroir absolutely has the right to free speech, her comments this past week and before have been vile and absurd, and certainly not up to the standards that a professor should be. And as a professor, she's always teaching, whether she's in or out of the classroom, and she serves as a role model for the next generation. And while I disagree with her comments and I condemn her comments, she does have a right to free speech. So I do believe that firing her on the basis of, specifically on the basis of her comments this past week, would be a mistake. It would be a slippery slope for deciding what comments, who decides what comments are offensive enough to fire a public university employee.
Yeah, you just think that what a terrible representative for that university. I want to read another one of Giroir's tweets. She says, "Sweetie, I work as a tenured professor. I make $100K a year doing that. I will never be fired. I will always have people wanting to hear what I have to say. Even you are one of them." What do you think the university should do? I mean, does this speak to a bigger systemic problem within our education system, that you can get away with saying these things? I mean, you're the ones that are teaching the future of this country.
Absolutely. I think education upon what free speech entails and what respect for differing viewpoints is key for students, staff, and faculty. And her comments do reflect intolerance and hatred towards those she disagrees with. And this sort of bias and intolerance from some professors is something we see and report on all the time at the Leadership Institute's campusreform.org. And I'm the president of a Students for Life chapter on campus, a pro-life organization. And last year, we actually filed a lawsuit against a professor, with ADF, against a professor who actually recruited students from his 8 a.m. class to erase messages, university-approved messages that we chalked on the sidewalks outside of the university. And what this professor did was actually censor student speech. And unfortunately, this professor and Professor Giroir are putting a very negative light upon our university. And this is very unfortunate for our campus and for other professors on our campus.
What is your organization?
But it's also something.
What does your organization think should be done to punish her? Should there be a punishment? What does the pro-life organization think should be done to punish the professor that erased our chalk messages? Do they think that, no, this professor here, do they think that anything should be done to send a message of who is representing that university?
I think the key would be to educate upon what free speech entails and what respect would be for differing viewpoints. And I think that this is something that we see.
You're educating us this morning, because you're standing up and saying they're saying these vile things, but yet they have a right to free speech. Yet you know these leftists, including this professor, would shut you down and your speech rights at a moment's notice. How does that equation get squared? Because you're talking about real tolerance and real free speech, and they're saying certain speech is acceptable and certain speech is not.
Absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right. If this is affecting her teaching within the classroom, then I think that certain disciplinary actions do need to be taking place, especially if this would be inciting any kind of violence against students or against any other group of individuals. But again, I think firing her on the basis of just her comments this past week on Barbara Bush would be a mistake, because it would be a slippery slope upon who deems what speech to be offensive enough
because
to be firing
you
her.
Believe in actual intellectual liberty. Bernadette Tazy, campusreform.org. Thank you. Just imagine, Abby, if it would have been a conservative professor saying, Obama supporters are stupid. What would happen at the university? Think about that double standard. Bernadette, thank you.
Bernadette, good to have you on this morning. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
You got it. Well, coming up, these deputies ambushed while eating lunch in Florida. But this morning, you can give back to their families in a big way, and we'll explain that coming up.
Then GQ magazine sparking some outrage for calling the Bible one of the most overrated books of all time. Seriously, that happened.
All right, and we always knew that Ed loves Democrats, but Ed, anything mainstream. And now we find out one Democrat really loves Ed. The story of Hillary Clinton and Ed Henry's romance.
He was the one that got away, Pete.
Woo.
That's a photo to wake up to, Mom.
It sure is.
It's not Valentine's Day.
No,
but it might as well be for Ed. What does this mean? We found out from a new book that Hillary Clinton, then candidate Hillary Clinton, may have had a kind of a thing for Ed Henry.
No way.
Yes,
I heard
absolutely.
about this, but I haven't been, I've been waiting for
Hold on. So this is a book by a New York Times reporter. We're not here to talk about the book, but we're here to talk about this quote. Listen to this quote on Hillary Clinton on Ed Henry. It's a quote. Despite aggressively questioning Clinton about her emails, because he's a good journalist, Ed Henry became a favorite. Quote, she would regularly look past her almost entirely female press corps to call on the Fox News correspondent with his cherub cheeks and his poochy pocket square.
Oh, man. I had heard this quote, but
Look
now
at
I'm
those
really
cherub
embarrassed.
Cheeks. You have kept this secret the whole time.
I know.
I know.
I didn't know you two had that bond.
I was worried that Pete would really tease me if he knew how much Hillary and I like each other.
Well, she loves you.
She loves me.
And
Clearly,
cherub
there was
cheeks.
some
My cherub
reciprocity there. And this is this Poochie? I don't know. I've never heard of Poochie, but it's got to be nice.
You know what's great is one of our producers, Sean, who knows nothing about fashion, Googled when he heard about this morning, Poochie, P-O-O-C-H-I-E.
It's what I would have done.
It's P-U-C-C-I.
I don't know
What
about
I really think is she loved sparring with me because it fired up her base.
See,
I'm taking on the
this is now
Fox
when he
guy.
tries to walk it back.
That's the real
explain
story.
it.
You did have some great moments. Seriously.
Thank you.
know,
Okay, I have
Henry
that
is. I'll hold on.
Wipe
to
it with a
Poochie.
cloth or a pocket square.
Go downstairs. It's time for you to do another interview with your cherub cheeks.
Cherub cheeks.
Maybe Hillary will be watching. All right, well done.
Bye.
Take away headlines.
We're going to turn now to a few headlines, and we'll be back to this story this morning, I'm sure. Starting with this video that will shock you. A bus driver seen here paying more attention to his cell phone than the road as he navigated the crowded streets of New York City. The passenger recorded this video after noticing the driver strolling and watching videos. The driver's name hasn't been released, but the company says he has been fired. Well, President Trump says he is considering a posthumous pardon for boxing's first black heavyweight champ, Jack Johnson. And it's all thanks to Sylvester Stallone. The commander-in-chief tweeting this: Sylvester Stallone called me with the story of heavyweight boxing champ Jack Johnson. His trials and tribulations were great. His life complex and controversial. Others have looked at this over the years. Most thought it would be done, but yes, I am considering a full pardon. Many think Johnson was wrongfully convicted in 1913 for having a consensual relationship with a white woman. And tributes pouring in this morning over Bernard Troyer, the actor best known for playing Mini-Me in Austin Powers movies.
I shall call him Mini-Me.
Who does not remember that? Troyer's team remembering the star as extremely caring and an inspiration to others. Mike Myers calling his Austin Powers co-star a consummate professional and beacon of positivity. Quote, he will be greatly missed. And actor Dean Cain sharing this picture with Troyer on Twitter. Troyer was 49 years old. No cause yet given for his death. And those are your headlines.
Oh, so sad. Thank you, Pete. All right, well, to another sad story. The two sheriff's deputies that were shot and killed in an ambush on Thursday, hailed by the Gilchrist County Sheriff as men of integrity.
I know Noel and Taylor personally. We talk about men of character, men of integrity, men of loyalty, men that want to do the right thing. I couldn't say enough good things about those two individuals to even do them a little bit of justice.
Well, the Tunnel to Towers Foundation, based here in New York, now announcing a campaign to raise money for the families of those fallen deputies.
Here with more, Chairman and CEO of the Stephen Siller Tunnel to Towers Foundation, Frank Siller. Always good to have you on. And
good morning.
Whenever you join us, it is for a good cause. When you saw what happened, why were you so motivated to help?
Well, I tell you, it really was like a flashback to December 2014. If you remember here in New York City when detectives Lou and Ramos were just sitting in their cars, and somebody came up from Maryland and just shot them because they were cops. And here they are, two deputies having an early dinner, and somebody comes into a Chinese restaurant and just kills them. And You know, there's been a false narrative out there for so many years about police officers all across the country, and it almost gives a license to some of these sick individuals to go do these type of things. When they happen and they leave young families behind, we want to be the foundation to make sure the Tunnel to Towers Foundation raises the money to take care of those families that young families are left behind and take care of the mortgages.
I spoke to that sheriff yesterday here on the show, and he talked about good coming from tragedy. And I said, well, Frank Siller wants to bring some good. I mentioned this. So what do you want to do for these families?
Well, first and foremost, we know that Officer Ramirez had two kids, a 5-year-old and a daughter that was just going to be turning 3 in May. We want to make sure that we pay off his mortgage. We understand he has a mortgage, and that's what we do. We just did it here with Fox and Friends, with the Raguso family and the Briggs family, the helicopter.
They were a New York Fire Department, and they lost their lives in Iraq, as I remember.
Correct. They went down in a helicopter in western Iraq, and they're the ones that had young families left behind. And we're about taking care of the young families left behind. My brother, a New York City firefighter, died 9/11, had 5 beautiful kids that were left behind.
Your family is incredible. You look at the stats, though, Frank. Just this past year, we're only in month April, 22 officers have been killed by non-accidental gunfire. That's more than half from all of last year combined. And as I said, we're only a few months into this year. What is going on, and what is your message overall about our officers?
They're the best. They're the finest. They protect our communities. They protect our lives. And for somebody, you know, it just irks me to listen to people that go out there and preach this narrative, where you had a segment on earlier today with Colin Kaepernick. I'm watching and I'm saying, what is this guy talking about? Our police officers are the greatest and put their lives on for us, on the line for us every single day. But when they die in the line of duty, we want to take the high road. We want to make sure that we're there for those families.
Well said. Real quick, tell us where people can help.
TunnelToTowers.org. My brother died 9/11, ran through the tunnel to the towers. TunnelToTowers.org. 100% of what you donate will go to these families.
We love it. All right, we'll make sure to have it on our website as well. Frank, thank you so much for all that you do and for being with us.
Thank you. God bless.
Thank you. All right, well, according to the Democrats, if you cannot beat the Trump administration, you sue them.
We know that this administration is Putin's poodle, and so they're not going to do anything. So we will continue to act. We're going to punch back, and that's what this lawsuit is about.
What is it really all about? Is it a move of desperation? We are going to debate that next. Plus, Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan, Katie Pavlich, Sarah Carter, and Kellyanne Conway all here this morning. We've got a big 3 hours still to go on this Sunday morning on Fox and Friends. Stay with us.
Live and learn, so you can learn to live.
2-0 pitch. Grounded to short. Scooped up by Simeon. It's a no-hitter. It's a no-hitter.
Some quick baseball headlines for you now. The 2018 MLB season has its first no-hitter courtesy of the Oakland A's Sean Manaea, the pitcher blanking baseball's hottest team, the Boston Red Sox, in the 3-0 win. And in LA, the Dodgers orchestrating the home run homecoming of an Air Force captain. Watch this.
I wish I could be with you tonight, but have a great time, and I can't wait to see you soon.
How sweet is that? That is Captain Robert Wolf surprising his wife Jordan after a 6-month deployment in Afghanistan. The couple embracing for the first time in more than 200 days. It's just so sweet. Pete, over to you.
Very cool. Well, according to the Democrats, if you can't beat them, sue them.
We are raising the cost of your interference. We know that this administration is Putin's poodle, and so they're not going to do anything. So we will continue to act. If you want to do that, if you're going to punch us, quite frankly, Chris, we're going to punch back. And that's what this lawsuit is about.
Well, the DNC suing the Trump campaign, Russia, and more over so-called election interference. So does this move just show the party's desperation? Here to debate, Democratic strategist Antoine Seawright and former political director for President George W. Bush, Matt Schlapp. Thank you both for joining us this morning. Appreciate it. So, Antoine, My understanding was that if you were a Democrat invested in the resistance, your talking point so far had been to let Bob Mueller do his job, let the special counsel get to the bottom of it. Why is the DNC preempting Bob Mueller and instead taking their own legal action here?
Well, I think the DNC just wants some answers, and the DNC wants to send a message to the Russians, to anyone else in our world who may want to try to attack our democracy as the Russians did the last election cycle. Now, this is not the first time the Democratic National Committee has filed a lawsuit against a presidential campaign committee. It happened with the Nixon crew during the Watergate situation, and they have a real reason to. Keep in mind, it was a Trump campaign and WikiLeaks who essentially worked together to hack into the DNC for the result of trying to swear elections.
Matt, if that were to be the case, wouldn't Bob Mueller be able to investigate that and find that? This is to you, Matt. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Pete. Yeah, absolutely. This is the whole problem, which is the Democrats do realize that this Russia made-up narrative is not working. And what I love about it, Pete,
that Russia didn't hack into our elections, Matt?
Let me keep going here, Antoine. What I love it as a Republican is we've all said all along on the Republican side that this is all just about politics. It's all just about delegitimizing Donald Trump. And you know what the Democrats just did for us? They just made our argument even better. It's all about politics. It's all about what's in the Democratic Party's interest, not in what is in the interest of Americans. And I think it makes this whole thing, after a year of a special counsel, it makes most Americans who aren't all that political say, you know what, enough is enough. Put your cards on the table. Tell us what you have. If there's no collusion, we don't want to hear about Donald Trump's 70 years of life on this earth. That's not what this is about. It was about Russian collusion. And if there's none, let's move on.
Matt, keep in mind, we are having this conversation because the Russians hacked into our elections. They went after our democracy. We're having this conversation because it was the special prosecutors appointed by a Republican because A.G. Sessions had to recuse himself because of his contacts with Russia.
Antoine, no, your argument, you're conflating the issue, which is what Democrats always do.
I'm not conflating
Election interference is very different than collusion. Bob Mueller's purview is to look into whether there was collusion. It doesn't look like there have any or have found any. Why is the DNC making this political as opposed to letting the special counsel do their job?
They're not making it political. What the DNC wants to do is to get answers, just like the American people want answers. That's why 69% of the American people agree that he should continue his investigation.
But 69% of people think Bob. Okay, go ahead, Matt.
We've got our answers. Let me just say quickly, what we know is the IG just said Jim Comey needs to be investigated for the leaks.
Matt,
we know
let him finish.
McCabe
Antoine
also has been fired because of his leaks. We have our answers. They're not answers the Democrats like.
Well, that's right. And there's a 2018 midterm coming up, and if the narrative isn't continued for Democrats, then what are they going to talk about on the campaign trail? That's my own personal perspective. Antoine C. Wright and Matt Schlapp, thank you for your time this morning. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Pete.
All right, well, coming up, conservative activist Candace Owens comments about Black Lives Matter getting the attention of Kanye West and have the internet going wild. We'll explain that. Plus, GQ magazine sparking outrage for calling the Bible one of the most overrated books of all time. Father Jonathan Morris, I feel like he begs to differ, and he's here to respond next.
How you doing, Henry? I agree with them. No, I'm just kidding. Oh, yeah. Breaking news.
All right, well, it is among the most sacred of religious texts in existence, detailing the relationship and moral code between God and man. But according to GQ magazine, the Bible is among the most overrated books of all time.
The magazine's writers say this, quote, "The Holy Bible is rated very highly by all the people who supposedly live by it, but who actually have not read it. Those who have read it know there are some good parts, but overall, it is certainly not the finest thing that man has ever produced. It is repetitive, self-contradictory, I don't even know the word, sententious, foolish, and even at times ill-intentioned."
Well, right after that, he was hit with lightning. Here to react, Fox News religion contributor, Father Jonathan Morris. What say you?
Well, you know what's interesting is when I first saw this, I thought this might be just a columnist who was trying to do it, make a sensationalist column in order to get attention. But this turns out this is the editors of GQ magazine who wrote this. This is the editors, which means the magazine is going on record saying this is what we believe. And it's just, to use their language, foolish. And even if you don't believe that this is an inspired word of God, in the last 50 years, 3.9 billion people have read this book. 3.9 billion Bibles have been published. That dwarfs every other book that has been read in the last 50 years. Now, and this is the last 50 years. This Bible is almost 2,000 years old, or 1,700 years old. So it's just foolish, and it's a shame.
What do you think their motivation is behind that? Why would they come together and say, you know what, this is a good thing to write for our readers?
Well, what they did is they took 21 books that they think should be digitally burned. Okay, which doesn't sound like a very hip thing, right? But 21, and they threw out a lot of the best books of Western civilization. And so I think what they're trying to do is say, hey, listen, we need to go a very different direction. We've already thrown the Bible out of schools.
Yep.
Right? I was just speaking to someone the other day who goes to a very, I would say, elite school here in New York City, and this little girl was telling me that hey, they're now starting to read the Bible again, but they read it purely as literature. Okay? The Bible is not just literature, just history. We believe it's inspired.
Well, it's a deconstruction of Western civilization. I mean, that's effectively what they're doing.
That's right.
Burning,
you like that?
Digitally burning our history. No, I hate it.
The most overrated book, obviously, is James Comey's book. Come on.
I love it. Yeah, well done, Ed. All
Father
right.
John, good to have
Nice
you
to
here.
have you. Thank you. All right, coming up, from Jesus to Jesus, rapper and hip-hop star Kanye West setting off an online firestorm when he gave a shout-out to conservative activist Candace Owens. Why Kanye is all about Candace at the top of the hour.
I don't know why people like being oppressed. 400 years of slavery, Jim Crow, which, by the way, none of you guys lived through. Your grandparents did, and it's embarrassing that you utilize their history.